Good morning, everybody. My name is James Burnett, Director of Financial Services for LinkedIn's North America business. This is the third year we've been getting together as a group, and it's really the best gathering yet. And it's interesting. I'm looking out across the room right now, and I see so many customers, partners, colleagues, thought leaders, and all of you here under the roof together, choosing to be here today is really what makes this event great. And I know we've got a number of folks from APAC, from EMEA, as you heard from Mohammed himself, and a number of other folks. People have come from sunny California to be here in this wonderful winter wonderland we call New York. So thank you very much again for being here. It's really what makes the day great. I couldn't be more thrilled to be introducing our next two speakers. Personally, I feel lucky to get to be able to work with these two folks every day. I think they're doing some of the most inspiring work in our industry. And really, between the two of them, they sit at the epicenter, the real heart of big data, content, and social. And they've shown us that when you get it right at scale, you can make really amazing transformational things happen, like create economic opportunity for professionals around the world. So definitely check out their LinkedIn profiles. And without further ado, welcome to the stage, Executive Editor of LinkedIn, Dan Roth, and LinkedIn co-founder, Alan Blue.
See you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Such a great crowd. It's amazing. I took my, the public schools are open, so I dropped my son off and walked through 3 feet of snow, and I assumed that there would be about 6 people sitting here today. So this is a good, hearty crowd. It's great. I am Dan Roth. I have the pleasure of interviewing Alan Blue, who is an incredible guy, the co-founder of LinkedIn, and who also happens to be my boss. So, but I'm saying all of that independent of that. Alan is, I'll just tell you a small story. Before I joined LinkedIn about 2.5 years ago, I was a journalist at Fortune and Condé Nast and a bunch of business places. Used to very day-to-day focus on what we're writing about, what comes out next. And when I was interviewing with Alan, we sat down and I was ready to talk about what was going to happen on day 1 on the job, day 2 on the job, what comes next. And Alan just stops and says, no, let's sketch out what happens 3 years from now. What does this look like 5 years from now? Alan takes an amazing long view while also being able to focus on the day-to-day. What we're going to talk about here is both the macro scene, not in the same way that Mohammed talked about macro, but in a sort of more futuristic, looking at where the professional world is going, and on the micro, what it was like to start LinkedIn, what his vision was for when he started it. And also, we talk a lot about the entrepreneur view of everyone having to own their own career, of career ladders being broken, and the individual is now forced to really think about what progress he or she needs to take to be successful. Alan embodies that and also carries it out for our members. So, Alan, why don't we start at the very beginning? Talk to me, if you would, or talk to us, if you would, a little bit about the early days at LinkedIn, how you and Reed started the company, and also what the initial vision was. It's very different than I think where we are today.
So, hey everybody, thank you for coming. It was snowing horizontally just 5 minutes ago, so it stopped. Let's see, the beginning of LinkedIn. So we founded LinkedIn in 2002. Basically, Reed and I had done a couple of companies together, and he said, come over, I have an idea I want to talk to you about. And went over and we talked about what was eventually going to become LinkedIn. Basically, we had in mind a product which would basically make every professional in the world as powerful as any entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. Because we knew how much we relied on the network of people who were right around us to be successful. And we wanted to see if we could build a product which would allow everybody to be surrounded by a powerful network like that in order for them to reach their career goals and for them to do their work on a regular basis. I mean, I think that what typifies Silicon Valley, actually typifies any small company where basically there are only 2 people you're talking to on a daily basis, is that you spend all of your time talking to your network outside. And being able to bring that power into the hands of anybody, no matter what job they're doing, was very much a part of what we wanted to get done. So we pushed the button in 2003, and on Cinco de Mayo in 2003, And here we are 11 or so years later. And yeah, really 300 million members, and
that's right.
The network is getting there.
Yeah. Now you were you hear so much today about kids go the STEM, the importance of STEM training, of making sure that you know how to code, and that's how you become successful, especially in Silicon Valley. That wasn't your background.
That was not my background.
Okay.
So I have a background in humanities. So I worked. I have degrees in drama and English. And I worked in the professional theater for 7 years before moving into high tech.
So that's great. There's hope for all of the liberal arts majors out there.
For everyone you know who has an English degree.
Right.
The key piece, though, and I think that one of the things. Oh, am I out? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So one of the key things I think for everybody to take away from that story is not so much how you're trained, but rather your ability and desire to learn on a lifetime basis. I mean, I had learned technology because I was interested in it, and basically, by the time I came to going into a career in technology, I had enough background I could do it. But that willingness to try a bunch of different things and the excitement of learning new stuff is actually super useful and tremendously indicative of future success. I would even argue that it is more and more necessary to be adaptable as we proceed in our careers. More so than it was even 10 years ago when we founded the company.
So you would argue that people who are right now looking at teenage kids or young kids, pushing them, that it is not necessarily, you are not in the camp that says focus entirely on CS, only think about computer science, know how to code, and that is what you have to do to stay competitive in the future.
I think that coding is a new part of literacy. And I think everybody needs to know how to do it. That doesn't mean you have to do only that. Mm-hmm. So you can do coding on the side and do drama as your main term job, or you can do it the other way around. Coding is important, STEM is important. I think so is how to think, how to be a great citizen.
Yep. So playing off of that, for about the first 8 years, LinkedIn was really focused on the profile. When you were crafting the company, when you were building it, was the initial thinking that this profile, the focus on the profile, that people building it up and then making connections with each other, was that always the path for the company, or did you have in mind we get everyone's profile on and then we move to the next level and the next level and the next level?
So at the beginning of the company, we had in mind basically a pattern which would lead us to an initial amount of growth. That growth would then be useful to people who were using the product. And then the engagement you'd be able to drive off that would in turn feed the growth. So everything sort of happened more or less at the same time, but you start with getting a network with some people in it.
Right. Okay. And I know that you had, what I think it's interesting looking at it, and Mohammed talked a little bit about this, the resilience. There were many moments, I think, at LinkedIn in the early years, especially where there were products that were tried out that looked like they were going to be huge successes, that weren't successes. It was not a straight line up, straight up line up and to the right that said this company is going to be a rocket ship, right?
That is right. I think that, so one of the really interesting things, so do people remember Friendster? Okay, so yes. Someone applauded. Excellent. Yeah, so Friendster was actually in the suite across from LinkedIn. So basically, we had a little office building. We each had 2-room suites, and we were right across the hall from each other. Actually, about 3 blocks from our current location. And basically, Friendster launched about 6 months before LinkedIn did. And if you remember what happened with Friendster, basically that product just took off. And literally within a year, they had gotten to the place where basically nobody could, well, actually people could use it, but they had to wait 45 seconds for a page to load. Because basically the power of the social network, and everybody was so excited to use it, it was such a high value, that people were logging in and waiting that 45 seconds to find out what their friends said or what their friends were up to. I know it's hard to imagine, but when it's comes the people who surround you, who you love and who love you. You're willing to put up with a lot to get in touch with that particular group. So naturally, when we launched, we thought we were going to go nuts, just like Friendster had gone nuts. And it turns out that the value propositions around a professional network, and LinkedIn's quite different than a social network, that the value propositions around a professional network are different, and they're a longer, slower burn. So we had to push really hard to get to the level of growth and engagement, and that the social networks had.
Great. Do you think that's made you or the company more resilient because of that?
I think it has two things. One, I think that we as founders, and thank you for mentioning it earlier, decided to take a long view at the beginning of the company. I mean, we had something we wanted to achieve. We were willing to stick with it. And what's more, the realities of the way the business grew actually forced us to do that. So we're pretty good at thinking about 10 years, 20 years ahead. Maybe not in great detail, but a commitment to the long-term value of what we're building.
Great. This is a crowd, just by being, the fact that they're here, is interested in the idea of content and community. And it's becoming more important to every company. In your role overseeing content and community at LinkedIn, can you talk a little bit about why it is important to LinkedIn and how you see it changing and growing? And also what it even means. What does content and community in the professional sphere mean to you?
So when we founded the company, we definitely didn't have in mind only the world of jobs and careers and so forth, because a professional network gets used for lots of different stuff. So we wanted LinkedIn to be a great mechanism which would filter the information which would flow to me, filter it through my network. In other words, take advantage of the brains of the people around me to bring me to stuff that actually matters and could be good for me as far as being successful. And that's on a day-to-day basis as well as getting that next job. We think of content as a very natural extension of a professional network, and we want people to be able to turn to LinkedIn on a daily basis for the insights and for the information they need, basically to be great at what they do.
And content is the way, I mean, there are many ways to be great at what you do. How does content or community fit into that? This is especially in the context of work, where you might just say, get the job done, complete my deliverables, do what my boss tells me to do, and check in and check out. Or why content and community? That would seem to be almost a plaything rather than a central part of it.
So everybody in this room, I'm sure, is going to consume some professional content, some information, look for some insights. I mean, just listen to Mohammed talking about insights around macroeconomics, and hopefully anything we say today will be insightful. But basically, you're turning to that information in order to help you make better decisions. And I'm sure every one of you could point to a time you went to Google, or when you went to a news site, or you read something online which affected a choice you made. As a matter of fact, you can probably point to 10 instances of that this week. Pardon me. So the question is, can your network make that more powerful? Can your network put the things which will actually help you make better decisions in your hands on a daily basis? When you look at programmers out there, they're turning to sites where they can talk with other programmers. Mm-hmm. When you're looking at marketing professionals, they're turning to LinkedIn groups to talk with other marketers, because they want to be able to take advantage of that knowledge among those people in order to be great at the decision they're making today.
I think one of the biggest changes that I saw, and you heard Jill and Mohammed also talk about this, is the idea of giving back. It is no longer a one-way street. That when you do deliver content, it is not delivering, it's putting it out there and waiting to hear the conversation that comes back and then playing off it. So when you think about content, is it this, how does that interaction play into it? How do you think about turning what is just a static piece of content into a conversation? How important is that? And also, how do you get people to even do it? Especially, I think, when in a finance world where there might be some hesitancy towards necessarily giving back. Is this the future, or is it a future for a particular type of worker?
So, I think that, it's a great question. There are a couple ways to look at it. I mean, I think one of the things that we've heard back from our influencers is how valuable getting feedback, getting commentary, helping them shape their ideas. In a lot of ways, so there's an old phrase which is, iron sharpens iron, which is basically that if you bring two friends together, theoretically, they will sharpen each other's wit, they will sharpen each other's knowledge just by the interactions they have. And being able to interact effectively with other professionals is actually a great way to sharpen what you're doing. I've heard professionals talk about being able to come to LinkedIn, and as they think about the things they need to say, I was just talking to Dave about, I don't know if he's here, Dave about that last night. He was one of our influencers, and he was talking about how writing for other professionals forces him to up his game in terms of the way he thinks about stuff. And the feedback he gets leads him to new insights. Mm-hmm. So I fully believe those are real effects. Now, one of the things which I think is kind of most unique, and I think hopefully would be valuable to this audience, is how can you basically encourage that kind of conversation in a way which is valuable not only to the people who are using it, as I said, primarily to people who are using it, but also to you, to your company, to your brand. We have a great story from Australia, as a matter of fact. So this is a story down there. Microsoft basically was trying to figure out a way to compete for the limited number of engineers in Australia, and they wanted to be able to attract people to come work for Microsoft in Australia. And so what they did is they actually used LinkedIn to do this. They went to LinkedIn and they set up basically a conversation environment for coders. And they ran coding contests and they talked about new technologies. Never talked about Microsoft. It wasn't about Microsoft. It was all about coding. It was all about bringing an environment together where coders could get together to talk. But it was all effectively set up and sponsored by Microsoft, who never interrupted it. It's turned into an amazing brand building environment for Microsoft. I mean, the coders in Australia now know that Microsoft supports them and their culture, and probably would be a great place to work when they're thinking about the next thing that they actually want to do. So building that kind of an environment where you can build a community of a group of people who you want to reach for their benefit is actually a powerful way to build a brand association for you.
Do you think that works in the finance world, in a place where it is much more heavily regulated, where every word is carefully chosen, where saying the wrong thing can come back and harm not just your company but your career, lead to massive fines, cause all kinds of problems? This is a crowd that gets, it is a world that gets a little bit nervous when it comes to being out there.
Yeah, I totally get it, and I think that, so I would love to talk to people about it afterwards. I don't have deep enough knowledge of that particular environment, so I can't answer the question myself. I do think, however, that a lot of clever, creative people would be able to come up with something which is a great application of that similar technology, that similar approach for this industry. I would also say that it's a necessity to actually get there. I mean, I kind of think of the world of 2014 and certainly the world of 2016 as a world of great agency on the part of consumers. Basically, consumers are highly informed. They're surrounded by people who can help them make decisions. They actually have very broadly available tools where they say, this is how I gather information about the things that I make, the decisions that I make. I think the world of selling to consumers, and I know that's not our only audience here, is a very different world than the world that we used to live in. In a world where people are more deeply informed and are connected to people who can help them make those choices, I think the consumer decision process is quite different. So I think being in those environments and being part of that decision-making process is a necessity for everybody.
So basically, if your employees or customers are already doing this, you're saying that there is no, that if this is where the world is going, either you can be part of it, or you can either get ahead of it, or you can ride it, but staying back is not necessarily an option?
Definitely. I mean, I think there are, as they say, if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it and get there first. I mean, if people, and I think the genie is out of the bottle on this one, when people start making those decisions and doing it in this new environment,
that they're going to trust that mechanism. It includes the people they care about. If I make a decision which includes the input from somebody I care about, I'm going to really trust that decision. And we all know about it. Word of mouth, so powerful as a mechanism for people, for basically building trust in a brand, in a product. When that actually happens, I think you need to be there.
I was just thinking about that this morning when I was on Twitter trying to figure out whether the schools were open or not, and watching people talk back to Mayor de Blasio and the head of the schools in a maybe not so constructive way, but explaining why what they were seeing should give them pause to opening the schools. It is a democratized. It is the voices have been democratized, so people are going to talk one way or the other. One of the things that that we were going to talk about here and that you focus on is the idea of the economic graph. This is a term that gets thrown around a lot by LinkedIn, and you're starting to hear it other places as well. But it is not necessarily one that is super easy to understand. Can you explain when you hear the term economic graph, what does that mean and why is it important?
Sure. So let me tell it sort of as a part of a story. I've been lucky enough in the last couple of years to be working with some folks in Washington. I was just there yesterday, as a matter of fact, talking about how you close the skills gap in the United States. Everyone's kind of familiar with what this is. I mean, 4 million jobs that employers can't find people to come take because the skills, they can't find people who have the skills to do it. And 15 million Americans who don't have jobs right now. So it's actually a pretty terrible situation. It's a real shame to have 4 million jobs and so many people who would like those jobs. So I sat down, talked to a bunch of people, and I found hundreds of just fantastic stories about places where the skill gap has been closed. They all happen in localities. So, great example, North Carolina, fantastic relationship between community colleges and employers to basically train workers in specific ways. When those workers exit that training, they basically have a job offer. They have a job they can go take. That kind of stuff is happening all across the United States. The thing it can't do is it can't scale. There's no way for that solution to be brought to the 4 million jobs or the 15 million unemployed, because these spot solutions exist only for these little microcosms, these little tiny pairings of community colleges or colleges and employers. So they're only affecting hundreds of thousands of people. So the question was, how do you actually get to the place where you can close that gap? How do you get to the place where you get the scale? You take all that know-how and how to do it, and you get to scale. And this is where the economic graph comes in. Because as we were talking about how to scale this, the missing piece was data and information. The missing piece was knowing where the job openings are, knowing which skills are there and which skills are not there, knowing who trains those skills. Visibility into that kind of stuff is extremely expensive to get right now. So what if you could bring all that information together in one place? What if you could bring all the jobs and all the skills and all the people together into a single network, a single economic graph, which basically describes all of those things and their relationships with each other. Now you have the data resource that you need in order to be able to solve that particular problem. And for LinkedIn, that for us is a I won't say a holy grail, because the graph itself is the target we are aiming for, but that is an amazing implementation for the greater good and for the good of all the potential employees and all the employers and all the schools. So now you can extend that idea of the graph. What if it included all the companies? What if it included all of the information, all that content which is flowing through the system? And you knew who said what, about what, and when. And you could build up a data resource which would be great at helping all of us make better decisions. So that's what we're trying to build when we're talking about building the economic graph. We're trying to bring all those pieces together and then put that data out as a resource for all of us when we're being great at what we do.
Do you see this as a LinkedIn as a something that LinkedIn can solve on its own? Is this something that you partner with other people with? Is this something the government steps in and does? How does the idea of the economic graph play out? Is it owned by one company, one entity?
So LinkedIn is committed to to getting there. And we know we're not going to do that alone. We know we're going to be working with everybody in this room, partners for making things better for for individual professionals. We know we're going to be working with schools. We're going to be working with government. We hope we will play that central role. We think this ability to see all the components of the economy together in one place is something the world really, really needs. And we're committed to making it happen, and we're going to work with everybody we need to in order to make it work.
And one of the things that Mohammed and Jill had talked about was the idea of this massive gap between what a college education, how a college education pays off in terms of being both employed and in terms of money made during a career versus not having a college degree, not attending college. Is the economic graph a way for the college educated to get more connected? Is it a way for everybody? Does this apply to blue collar jobs and white collar jobs?
It definitely applies throughout the economy. We think there are about 3.3 billion professionals in the world. By professionals, we mean people who basically make their living by applying their skills. We think there are about 600 million people we would normally call professionals, white collar professionals. In order for the graph to work, in order for us actually be able to attack all the parts of the economy we believe can be attacked, we need to bring it all together in one place. And I think that it's actually a space which has room for, hopefully, for alternative forms of education as well. So everyone here, I'm sure, has heard about MOOCs, about the massively open online campuses or courses. So Coursera and Udacity and all these guys who are experimenting with education broadly and using the tools which have been developed in the last 15 years on the internet to distribute that learning more broadly. In an environment like that, where we know the outcomes for education, whether they be a four-year degree or a community college or an online course, and we know what kind of skills they provide, and we know where you can actually acquire those things, I really believe that you can create a system where education itself begins to change its shape. Where people put together a collection of traditional degrees and online courses and alternative learning mechanisms so they can continue to do what they do throughout their lives. We are going to find in the next 10 or 15 years that all of our jobs are going to be obsolete. And I know that's weird. Looking into the past, that hasn't been the case, but I really believe that the rate of technology change is going to radically change the way we all work. And that's going to happen faster and faster. And this is one of those places where being adaptable, being knowledgeable, being able to jump from thing to thing, and being able to find the information and the instruction you need to make it successful are going to be keys to success.
Interesting. You know, Mohammed talked a little bit about the idea of reaching a T junction or a Y junction or being on the eagle's wings. What you're describing is basically hitting those junctions constantly in a career.
Yeah.
That you are going, so do you think this is, it's nice, it's great to talk about the economic graph, what's being built, connecting them. Do you think the people are, do you think that the workers of today or the kids that are just coming in, getting out of college or just about to go into it, are they prepared for that kind of, that kind of path?
Some definitely are.
Mm-hmm.
So not everyone. As we've been working on this question of closing the skills gap, one of the really fascinating things has been really thinking about what the foundations of that adaptability really are. So in other words, what really separates someone who's going to be successful in their career from somebody who's not? Education is definitely a big part of it. But early in life, having expectations that I will do great things, and then having access to the information to be able to make those decisions over time, and most time that comes word of mouth from my family, from my friends, from my professors, my high school guidance counselor, wherever it might have come from. Those I think are strongly indicative. Whether you actually end up getting a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, I think needs to be a choice. Mm-hmm. But I think the thing which really makes a difference for people is a career mindedness, an idea that you can control your own future and have the ability to do it. And that's where agency comes in. If you have the ability to control your own future, then you are adaptable. And you can change as the world changes around you.
it certainly means from a career perspective, it means you have to constantly keep your eyes open. I would think also from a financial services perspective, it means that you have to constantly be thinking about it is not get into your 401k, keep writing it out, keep investing, and then you retire one day. We're talking about times where there are dips. You dip into savings, you come out one side, you build back up again. I mean, it is no longer the straight path to retirement. Is, I think that no one in this room is probably under the impression that it's been that way for a long time, but it sounds like what you're describing is a much more volatile path that involves not just work, but also savings and investing.
Yeah, so I have no prediction as far as how the world of financial services is going to change specifically, but it's changed so much in the last, even from my perspective, it's changed so much in the last 15 years. My dad was a guy with a pension from United Airlines, which more or less disappeared when United went bankrupt. It's a very different world now, and a world where you have to take much greater responsibility for yourself and your family than you've had to before. You guys all know that. There are other changes as seismic coming down the line. Who knows what I don't know what they're going to be. Right. I bet y'all do. But.
Why don't we take some questions? We have a few minutes left. Does anyone have any? I don't know if we have microphones, but if you say it, I'll just repeat it so the folks on the live stream can hear what it is. Anyone? No?
No? Oh, come on.
There's got to be something out there. What's coming for the future? No? I'll ask you, Alan, a question, which is, we have the influencer program. We have about 500 folks who are writing content on there. How come you haven't written anything yet?
So I really appreciate the influencers, the amount of time it takes. It is actually a lot of work. So the fact that Mohammed's been able to write all the stuff he's actually been able to write, fantastic. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to think about, like, what would I say and how would I put it out there? That's something that we're going to make easier.
Does it surprise you that so many people that there is still this focus on long-form writing when we are told constantly that it is all about really short bites and getting something quickly and video and no one reads anymore? I mean, have you been surprised at all by the success of this?
No, and I think the reason is that truthfully, it's the age of multiple formats, not the age of one format.
Great. Do we have any questions?
Now we can wrap it up.
All right.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Aha.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about the impact of branding ourselves in the future, because again, these tools are enabling us to brand ourselves because we're valuable for us. So what's the impact and how do you see engaging the tools with the companies and also the individuals to manage our careers and also selling ourselves to others?
It's a great question. So just to rephrase the question, basically when you think about this, where we are today, you have to actually be a brand yourself. You are a brand within your company, which is also a brand. How do you navigate that? Tell me if I've got this right, but it's basically how do you navigate that idea of branding yourself while also being an employee, working for a larger brand? How important is it, and how do you stay on the right side of your company while also building up building yourself up?
So I think, so again, this answer is not specific to the financial services industry because I know there are specific issues. The general thought, though, is that innovation is driven so this is my perspective, innovation is driven by a certain amount of openness and a certain amount of interaction with the world outside your company. And I think we basically make a mistake when we companies make a mistake when we try to control or shape what our employees do to a too great degree. I think it's really important for individuals who work at our companies to be out there forming those brands and relationships. My co-founder Reed wrote a paper which was about what he called tours of duty. Anybody read that? So tours of duty is basically this concept. For the longest time, the contract, or the compact is the term he uses, between the company and the employee was a lifelong one. And people could expect to join a company and then stick with it forever. You didn't need to build a brand outside or any of that. The reality today, though, is that we should expect people to move around from company to company. And if you're going to be able to build up the powerful group of employees who are going to be able to make your company successful, you know you're going to be getting those people from other companies. And what's more, you know those people are going to be leaving your company down the line. So helping them forward in their, so all of us helping each individual employee forward in terms of their own career and their own ability to become great at what they do is going to become a key component for, I think, how companies think about HR, think about employment, think about how they talk to their employees about their role, both at and then after their companies. We've talked to biotech firms who basically say it's really important people leave our company because they go out and then represent us in the world outside. So these tours of duty, these 2 to 4 year tours of duty where you know somebody's going to go, help that person build that brand, help them be an advocate for your company when they actually leave, because you know it's coming.
That comment you made.
Hold on a second, we do have a microphone coming right now. All right.
Thanks. The comment you made about all our jobs being obsolete in the next 10 to 15 years is pretty scary. So I wonder, you've probably thought about that a lot. What do you think is going to happen, and how can we prepare ourselves for it? Are we all going to be replaced by technology, or?
I don't think we're all going to be replaced by technology. There are certainly a lot of jobs that are going to be replaced by technology, but the main change is going to be the change which occurred, kind of like the change we saw in the publishing industry, the change we saw in the music industry. As the technology creates different mechanisms for distribution with different requirements for what those roles are inside. Basically, the whole role of the great record producer and everything is kind of gone because of the way technology has enabled music distribution over time. So we should expect those things to change as technology opens up new mechanisms for reaching your customers, new mechanisms for you to interact with partners, for companies to work with other companies. All of those things, when enabled by technology, are going to change what each of us does. It doesn't necessarily even have to be a radical change. It'll be radical seen from the outside. But for each of us internally, if we're able to roll with that change, if we're able to prepare ourselves by being knowledgeable and sort of seeing it coming, then we'll be able to make our own choices about where we want to end up. We can even govern that change. We can even shape that change. But it requires and it's funny because I was talking to some folks at dinner about this last night, it requires an entrepreneurial attitude to doing stuff within your own career and then within the company itself. Companies which encourage entrepreneurship and new approaches to things are going to be the most flexible and adaptive.
And if you work at a company where that's not true, I would assume your argument is you yourself need to be entrepreneurial and
everybody needs to be entrepreneurial, for sure, individually. But everybody should also help your company be entrepreneurial. What you can do to say, we're not flexible enough, let's make sure that we get flexible, is just vital, I think, for any company to survive going forward.
Sure, we have a question in the back over here.
Okay, we have time for one more question, so this will be the last one, and then we'll go to our next session.
With the pace that technology is rapidly changing and the amount of time it takes to implement new coursework in some of the traditional universities' four-year degrees, do you think it's still necessary for companies to look at hiring students that come out of a four-year university? Or is it possible to find that talent in students that are pursuing more of an alternative type of education and learning?
Great question.
I think it's a great question. So I agree that four-year universities are having will have a hard time keeping up with the pace of change. I think right now employers use four-year degrees kind of as a shorthand for this person is smart. Instead of like really caring what they actually learned while they were there. I mean, you look for a particular degree. Like for instance at LinkedIn, when we hire product managers, we hire people with computer science degrees because we want to make sure that people have those skills when they come in the door. But it's kind of a shorthand for, are you technical? And are you capable? I believe that, and this is part of what I hope the economic graph delivers, is that when you actually have information about what the outcomes of those alternative methods really are, then you can begin to replace that kind of crude shorthand, which is, I have a four-year degree, with something much more precise and says something much more reliable about any given employee who walks in the door. So I would start looking at it now, and I would start trying to figure out how you would actually take advantage of the information that exists already. I would totally work with Khan Academy and with Coursera and with all those guys. Find out what they're doing, find out what their courses actually produce, and get ready for that change down the line.
That's great. Thank you very much, Alan. It was terrific.
Yeah, thanks everybody.